Liam was a man of order. As a software developer, his life ran on logic and predictable systems. His apartment, his code, even his morning coffee routine. Everything was neat, efficient, and organized. So, when he needed a new roommate, he searched online with a clear set of criteria: tidy, respectful of personal space, and ideally, someone with an opposite work schedule. Marcus seemed like a perfect fit. During their brief meeting at a coffee shop, he came across as friendly, soft-spoken, and explained that he worked the night shift as a cybersecurity technician, meaning they'd rarely cross paths. It would be like having a ghost who pays half the rent. Marcus had joked. Liam liked that. The first few weeks after Marcus moved and confirmed Liam's choice, the apartment was uncannily clean. There were no dirty dishes in the sink, no late-night noise. They communicated mostly through post-it notes on the fridge. The arrangement was perfect, a silent symbiosis. The glitches began subtly, easy to dismiss as minor bugs in a complex script. The first was his Instagram password. One morning, he tried to log in and was met with an incorrect password notice. Annoyed, he assumed he'd forgotten it and went through the reset process. He didn't think much of it. A week later, he opened his inbox to find a crucial chain of work emails already marked as read. He was certain he hadn't opened them. Must have clicked on them on my phone without realizing, he told himself, a vague unease settling in his gut. He was starting to feel a little forgetful, probably from being overworked. The most unsettling incident happened while he was on a video call with his sister, Clara. "You look tired," she said. "Is it because you were up late gaming with Jason last night?" Liam frowned. "I didn't game with Jason last night. I went to bed early." "That's weird," Clara said, scrolling through her phone. "He said you guys were playing Valhalla until 2 a.m. Said you were a little quiet, though." "He must be mistaken," Liam said, but a cold prickle went down his spine. He hadn't spoken to Jason all week. Liam began to question his own sanity. Was he burning out? Was he developing some strange form of amnesia? He convinced himself it was stress. He was in the final crunch of a major project, pulling 12-hour days. His mind was surely playing tricks on him. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon. He was debugging a line of code when a notification popped up on his monitor. It was a security alert email from his bank. Alert: a login to your account was made from a new device. If this was not you, please secure your account immediately. What made the blood freeze in his veins was a listed IP address. It was geolocated to his own apartment building. It wasn't him. He'd been logged in on his computer all day. Marcus was supposedly at work. So who? The paranoia he had been suppressing for weeks erupted into full-blown terror. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't stress. Something was actively happening. His developer instincts took over. He was no longer a confused victim. He was a problem solver. He opened a command line interface and ran a network scanner, searching for all devices connected to his Wi-Fi. The list populated: his laptop, his phone, the smart TV, Marcus's phone, and one other, an unknown device with a MAC address he didn't recognize, broadcasting a weak but steady signal. It was named Bridge 07. Heart pounding in his chest, Liam used a signal analysis tool to pinpoint the device's location. The signal was strongest from his own bedroom, more specifically from the area around his desk. He walked into the room, feeling like an intruder in his own space. Everything looked normal. He checked under the desk, behind the monitor, in the drawers. Nothing. Then his eyes fell on the back of his desktop PC tower. The usual tangle of wires, power, HDMI, Ethernet. But there was one thing that didn't belong. A tiny black device, no bigger than a thumb drive, was plugged into a spare USB port. It had a minuscule blue LED that was blinking rhythmically. It looked like a harmless Wi-Fi dongle, but Liam knew it wasn't. He hadn't put it there. With a trembling hand, he gently pulled it out. He recognized it instantly from cybersecurity articles he'd read. It wasn't just a camera or a microphone. It was a sophisticated data cloning device, a keylogger and packet sniffer rolled into one. It recorded every keystroke, took screenshots, and intercepted network traffic, passwords, emails, banking information, everything, and broadcast it wirelessly to a nearby receiver, to Bridge 07. And then all the pieces clicked into place, forming a horrifying picture. The changed Instagram password, the read emails, the gaming conversation with Jason. They weren't glitches. They were test runs. Marcus had been testing his access, practicing being him. He wasn't just watching him. He was duplicating him. He was building a digital clone of Liam, a doppelganger he could control. He was slowly, methodically erasing his identity to replace it with his own. Liam felt the floor drop out from under him. He stumbled back and sat heavily on his bed, the small, malevolent device resting in his palm. The violation was so much deeper than being spied on. This was an existential invasion. Marcus didn't want to watch his life. He wanted to steal it. What should he do? Call the police? What would he say? My roommate plugged a USB drive into my computer. It sounded petty, paranoid. Marcus could easily deny it. Say it was a mix-up. He had to confront Marcus. He had to. But when and how? Before he could decide, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. He glanced at it. A chill even more profound than what he'd felt before shot through him. It was a text message from his own number. Don't worry, the new version will be better. He knew he'd found the device. He was watching him right now, probably through another camera he hadn't found, or perhaps he already had access to his laptop's webcam. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was taunting him. Panic rose in Liam's throat. He was a tech expert, yet he was facing an enemy who seemed to be a step ahead of him in his own domain. He scrambled to his laptop, trying to change his primary email password. Incorrect password. He tried again. Your account has been temporarily locked due to too many failed login attempts. He was locked out of his own account. His phone pinged again. This time it was a notification from Facebook. A new post had been added to his timeline. He opened the app. It was a photo of him and Clara, an old one from a summer vacation. The caption read, "Missing my amazing sister. Hope to see you soon." But the voice wasn't his. The emoji usage was slightly off. Small details, but to Liam, they screamed. The copy was learning. It was getting better. He sat there helpless, staring at the screen. He was trapped. Marcus had seized the infrastructure of his modern life, his accounts, his relationships, his digital self. How do you prove you're you when another, more convincing version of you is out there, pulling the strings? He heard a key in the lock of the front door. Marcus was home early. Liam didn't move. He just sat on his bed in his silent room, clutching the small USB drive. He was a ghost in his own home, a digital phantom about to be deleted, and he could hear the footsteps of his replacement approaching. The crunch of gravel under the tires was the only sound that broke the thick silence of the Appalachian forest. Chloe squeezed Ben's hand as her old SUV pushed deeper down the narrow dirt road. "Are you sure this is the right way?" she asked, her voice laced with nerves. The late afternoon sun filtered through the dense canopy, painting shifting patterns of light and shadow across their path. Ben glanced at the GPS on his phone, which now showed nothing but a lonely car icon on a blank green background. Signals gone, but the host said to just keep going. The cabin's at the end of the road. He offered a reassuring smile, but Chloe could see the tension around his eyes. They had been driving for 6 hours from New York City, seeking an escape from the endless sirens, the demanding work emails, and the oppressive weight of concrete. The listing for the secluded log cabin, a peaceful retreat, had sounded like the perfect antidote. Finally, the road opened into a small clearing, and there, nestled among towering pines, was a cabin. It was just as cozy as the pictures, with a wraparound wooden porch and a stone chimney. An older man, with a wild mane of white hair and a flannel shirt, was waiting for them on the steps. "Welcome, welcome," he said with a broad smile that crinkled the corners of his clear blue eyes. "I'm Alan, your host. Good trip?" "Hi, Alan. I'm Ben, and this is Chloe," Ben said, shaking the man's hand. "A little hard to find, but we made it." "Ah, that's part of the charm," Alan chuckled. "No one to bother you out here. No self-service, no internet, just you and nature." He handed him a heavy, old-fashioned brass key. "Make yourselves at home. Firewood's all stacked by the hearth. If you need anything, it's a long walk back to the main road, but I doubt you'll want to leave." He winked, then turned and ambled down a small path that disappeared behind the trees, leaving them alone. Inside, the cabin was even better than they'd hoped. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, and worn leather armchairs looked inviting. "See? You were worried for nothing," Ben said, wrapping his arms around Chloe from behind. "This is exactly what we needed." Chloe leaned back against him, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to melt away. "You were right," she whispered. "The first night was magical. They built a fire, drank wine, and talked for hours. The silence of the forest was no longer menacing. It was soothing, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant call of an owl. The unease began the next day. While cleaning up after breakfast, Ben spilled his coffee. The dark brown liquid spread across the wooden floorboards. As he knelt to wipe it up, he noticed one of the planks under the bearskin rug looked different. It seemed loose. Curious, he worked his fingernail under the edge. The plank popped up easily, revealing a small, hollow space beneath. And in that space, wrapped in a piece of oilcloth, was something small. "Chloe, come look at this," he called. Chloe came over, peering over his shoulder as he unwrapped the cloth. Inside was an SD card. "No label, nothing." "That's weird," Chloe said. "What do you think it is?" "No idea. Probably something a previous guest dropped." Ben shrugged. "Just some photos, I bet." But the seed of curiosity was planted. That evening, after dinner, Ben pulled out his laptop. "Should we take a look?" he asked, a hint of a kid's forbidden excitement in his voice. Chloe hesitated. "I don't know, Ben. It feels like an invasion of privacy." "Come on, just a peek. If it's family photos, we'll turn it right off." Chloe finally relented. Ben slid the card into the slot. A single, untitled folder appeared on the screen. He double-clicked it. Inside were dozens of other subfolders, each named with a string of numbers that looked like a date. The oldest was from 2 years ago. "Wow, someone's a regular here," Ben muttered. He clicked on a folder from last summer, labeled July 14th, 2024. A series of video files appeared. The first, VID_001MP4, showed a family, a father, a mother, and 2 young children, laughing on the porch. "Welcome to the Miller family vacation," the dad said cheerfully to the camera. The next few videos documented happy moments, the kids roasting marshmallows, the family on a hike. It was all perfectly normal. Until the 7th video. The camera was propped up on the mantelpiece, aimed at the window. It was dark outside. "Did you hear that?" The wife's voice, Sarah, whispered from off-screen. It sounded like someone walking around out there. "It's probably just a deer, honey," the husband, Tom, replied, but his voice sounded uncertain. The next video was filmed the following night. The camera was shaking violently. "It's back!" Sarah cried. "Tom, it's trying to get in." A heavy, sickening, scraping sound to be heard at the front door. The final video, VID_009.MP4, was completely black. There was only audio. The frantic screams of Sarah and Tom, the cry of their children, and then a horrifying crash as the door was smashed open. The scraping was loud now, mixed with wet, guttural sounds unlike any animal they had ever heard. The camera was seemingly knocked to the floor, and after a few more seconds of terrible screaming, the video cut out. Chloe and Ben sat in stunned silence. their faces illuminated by the blue glow of the laptop screen. "What the hell was that?" Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. "It has to be a joke," Ben said, but he couldn't tear his eyes from the screen. "Some homemade horror movie or something. It has to be." But he didn't believe his own words. The terror in those screams had been too real. With a shaking hand, he clicked on another folder, October 22nd, 2024. This time it was a group of college kids. The story was the same: happy, partying first days, then nervous whispers about noises in the night, and finally a chaotic, scream-filled final video. They went through folder after folder, a growing sense of dread tightening in their chests. Each set of videos told the story of different guests: a honeymooning couple, two brothers on a fishing trip, a woman on a solo retreat. But they all ended the same way: the scraping, the door breaking, the screams, then silence. "Ben, turn it off," Chloe pleaded, tears well in her eyes. "I don't want to see any more." "Wait," Ben said, his voice tight. He pointed to the very last folder in the list. The most recent one, August 17th, 2025. That was last weekend. He opened it. This time it was a couple their own age, but this couple was more cautious. The third video showed the man, Mark, checking the locks on the doors and windows. "Something's not right about this place," he said to his girlfriend, Lisa. "I keep feeling like we're not alone." Their final video was different. They had been ready. They had dragged a heavy bookcase in front of the door. The camera was set up in the corner of the room, capturing the whole scene. Chloe and Ben watched, holding their breath. The scraping began louder and more furious than ever. The bookcase shuddered as an immense force slammed against the door from outside. Mark and Lisa were huddled in the corner, the man holding a fireplace poker. The door began to splinter, would burst inward, and then, for a split second, through a hole in the door, they saw it. It wasn't a bear or a person. It was unnaturally tall and thin, with long, spindly limbs that ended in what looked like knife-like talons. Its eyes glowed in the dark, two malevolent white pinpricks. The door exploded inward. The bookcase toppled over. The creature scrambled into the room. The video ended in a flurry of screams and static. Ben slammed the laptop shut. The silence in the cabin was now terrifying. The crackle of the fires sounded like breaking bones. Every shadow in the corner of the room seemed to hide something. "We have to get out of here," Chloe said, her voice barely a broken whisper. "Now." Ben nodded, already on his feet. "Get your jacket." They moved in a panicked silence, grabbing their things. Chloe was pulling on her boots when she froze, her eyes wide. "Ben," she said, her voice like ice. "Do you hear that?" Ben stood perfectly still, listening. And then he heard it too, a faint sound from outside, a sound that was now seared into their minds. Scraping. It was on the front porch. Heavy, slow, like the claws of something huge being dragged across the wooden planks. They looked at each other, pure, absolute terror on their faces. They weren't watching a horror movie. They were in one, and they had just watched the opening scenes. The scraping stopped, and then a powerful thud hit the door, shaking the entire cabin. Alan had been right. They wouldn't want to leave. They couldn't. Eleanor needed money, a truth as stark and urgent as the air she breathed. Student loans were piling up, rent was due, and her refrigerator was a sad, empty expanse save for an expired yogurt and a jar of mustard. As an art student majoring in sculpture, typical part-time gigs like waitressing or retail seemed to drain her creative soul. So, when she saw the flyer on the university notice board, it felt like a flicker of light in her financial fog. Responsible house sitter needed. 1 month. Secluded estate. Generous pay. Discretion required. Generous pay were the only 2 words Eleanor truly saw. After a brief, strangely impersonal phone interview with a man whose deep, monotone voice identified him as Mr. Sterling Stewart, she had the job. The Sterling estate was an hour's drive from the city, hidden behind a tall, wrought iron gate and a winding road shaded by ancient oaks. The house itself was an angular, modern construction of glass and gray stone that looked out of place in the dense surrounding forest. It felt more like a museum than a home. The steward, a thin man with a featureless face, met her at the door. He gave her a brisk tour, pointing out the kitchen, the guest bedroom where she would be staying, and the indoor conservatory that needed watering every other day. Mr. Sterling is a collector, he explained, his voice devoid of inflection. He requests that all pieces of art remain untouched. The house was filled with sculptures, bronze figures in agonized poses, abstract marble pieces that twisted like writhing creatures, and plaster busts whose blank eyes seemed to follow her every move. They were beautiful, but deeply unsettling. And the final, most important rule, the steward said, stopping before a heavy oak door with no handle, only a sleek card reader. Mr. Sterling's study. You're not to enter, under any circumstances. Everything you need is out here. Eleanor nodded, a shiver running down her spine. I understand. The steward gave a curt nod and left, leaving her alone in the vast silence of the house. The first few days passed in a strange, quiet peace. Eleanor watered the plants, collected the mail, mostly auction catalogs and art journals, and spent her time sketching the statues. But the silence began to weigh on her. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It felt like a hell breath, an anticipation. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She would turn around in the long hallways, absolutely certain someone was behind her, only to find a marble bust staring into the middle distance. On the third night, she was woken by the sound of faint classical music, a sad, reedy violin melody. She sat bolt upright in bed, heart hammering. The music seemed to be coming from down the hall, from the study. It lasted only a minute before it cut out, leaving the silence even heavier than before. The next morning, she told herself she dreamed it. By the fifth day, her unease had curdled into real fear. She had been sketching a bronze sculpture of a falling Icarus, a piece she'd studied for hours. She left the room to get a glass of water, and when she returned, the statue's pose had changed. Only slightly, an arm extended an inch further, the head bowed at a different angle. But it was different. She knew it. It was impossible. These statues weighed hundreds of pounds. Paranoia began to set in. Was she going crazy? Was the isolation getting to her? She started taking pictures of the sculptures with her phone, to have proof that they were moving. The breaking point came at the end of the first week. While looking for a book in the cavernous living room, she stumbled upon a sleek black tablet left on the coffee table, as if forgotten. She assumed it belonged to the steward. Curious, she picked it up. The screen flared to life. No password required. It displayed a grid of small squares, each one a live video feed. Eleanor's heart stopped. Cameras, dozens of them, expertly hidden in the corners of ceilings, inside smoke detectors, disguised as screws on the walls, and even embedded within the hollow eyes of some of the statues. She saw the kitchen, her bedroom, the hallway. She saw herself, standing in the living room, her face a pale mass of horror, captured from 3 different angles. Nausea washed over her. The feeling of being watched wasn't her imagination. It was real. As she stared at her own image, a green text box materialized on the screen, the letters appearing with silent, terrifying finality. I see you found them. Eleanor dropped the tablet. It landed on the thick Persian rug with a muffled thud. She backed away, her eyes glued to the screen. Now the real game begins. A loud clack echoed through the house. Then another and another, metallic, definitive sounds. She ran to the front door and yanked the handle. It was locked solid. She sprinted to the sliding glass door at the back. Locked. She tried the windows. All of them were sealed, bolted from within by electronic locks she'd never noticed before. Find a way out before I return. The last line of text appeared on the tablet screen. A taunt. She wasn't a house sitter. She was a rat in a maze, a prisoner in a madman's private gallery. Cold horror seized her, but then Another emotion rose through it. Fury. She would not be a plaything. She would not become part of his collection. She picked the tablet back up. If he could see her, she could see the house. It was her only advantage. She began a methodical search. She scanned every camera feed, looking for any possible exit. A basement window, a service hatch, anything. Every potential egress was sealed. As she worked, the house began to play against her. The lights in the hallway would flicker and die, plunging her into sudden darkness. That sad violin music would start and stop at random, emanating from hidden speakers. Once, Mr. Sterling's deep, monotone voice echoed from the intercom system, a robotic, dispassionate sound. "You're getting cold, Eleanor." The statues continued to move, their subtle shifts now taking on a sinister meaning. They were like silent supervisors, accomplices in his game. They were mounted on motorized platforms. She realized, controlled remotely, he was rearranging the stage around her, keeping her off balance. Her only hope, she knew, lay behind that one door, the forbidden room, the study. If there was a control center for this high-tech trap, it had to be in there. The door was secured by a card reader. She had no card. She searched everywhere, checking the steward's code in the mudroom, rifling through drawers in the kitchen. Nothing. She returned to the door, desperation setting in. She looked closely at the reader. It was made by Sterling Security. A thought sparked in her mind. It was a long shot, but it was all she had. She ran to the main gallery, where a massive bust of a Roman emperor was labeled Sterling Collection First Acquisition. She had sketched it several times, fascinated by the intricate detail. She remembered something. There was a small, almost invisible seam at the base that didn't look natural. She pushed against the bust with all her might. It didn't budge. She pushed again, putting her entire body weight into it. With a low grinding of stone on stone, the base shifted slightly, revealing a small recess. Inside was a black plastic keycard. Heart pounding, she ran back to the study and swiped the card. With a soft beep, the electronic lock disengaged. She pushed the door open into a space that was a complete antithesis of the rest of the house. The room wasn't a study. It was a command center. One wall was covered in monitors, displaying every camera angle, including a live feed of her standing in the doorway. A large leather chair sat before a complex control desk. This was the spider's heart. On one monitor, old footage was playing on a loop. She saw other people. A young man pacing frantically. An older woman sobbing in a corner. The previous house-sitters. She wasn't the first. Impressive. Sterling's voice said, clear and close this time, coming from speakers on the console. No one has found the car that quickly. Who are you? Eleanor screamed, her voice trembling with rage and fear. What do you want? I want to watch. The voice replied, still terrifyingly calm. I am a collector, Eleanor. I collect art, but art is static. It is dead. I crave to see living art. Fear, desperation, resilience. These are the most beautiful sculptures. And you, my dear, are a masterpiece. Eleanor looked at the console, searching for the controls to the locking system. She saw a schematic of the house, with red lock icons over all the exits. The game is not over, Sterling said. You found my den. Now you must prove you are worthy of freedom. A timer appeared on the main screen. 10 o'clock. Unlock the doors before the ventilation system reroutes anesthetic gas into the house. Then, you'll simply fall asleep. And when you wake, you'll become a permanent part of collection. A frantic race began. Eleanor tried to navigate the complex interface. Sterling's voice a constant presence in her ear, taunting her, trying to distract her. She tried to click on the lock icons, but they were disabled. A pop-up window demanded a password. He was playing with her. What was the password? His first dog's name? His birthday? It could be anything. She looked around the room, searching for a clue. Her eyes landed on a small, solitary painting on the wall, the only piece of art in the room. It was an oil painting of a ship foundering in a violent storm. Beneath it was a small brass plaque. The Medusa, Jericho, the Medusa, a true story of shipwreck, of survival, desperation, and madness. A perfect theme for him. She typed Medusa into the password field. Access denied. The timer was at 7:23. She tried again. Jericho. Access denied. She took a deep breath, trying to think. He was a narcissist. He saw himself as an artist, a controller. The art wasn't the key. He was the key. He had signed his messages. S. Sterling. She typed Sterling. Access denied. The timer was at 4:12. A faint hissing sound began to emanate from events. She was thinking about it wrong. It wasn't about him. It was about her. What had he called her? A masterpiece. A living work of art. What was she? A sculpture student. She had spent the week studying his pieces. Which one? The one he had used to taunt her, to unbalance her. The one she had noticed move. She typed Icarus. Access granted. The lock icons on the screen turned green. Without wasting a second, Eleanor clicked Unlock All. She heard the satisfying clack of electronic locks disengaging all over the house. Bravo, Sterling's voice whispered, with no hint of disappointment, only cold admiration. What a performance. Eleanor didn't answer. She turned and ran. She ran out of the study, down the hall, past the statues that now seemed mute and inanimate. She burst through the front door and didn't stop. She ran down the long drive, not daring to look back, until the oaks swallowed the house from view. The police were called. An investigation was launched. But the house, when they arrived, was empty. There was no sign of Mr. Sterling or his steward. The ownership of the estate was traced back through a series of shell corporations to a dead end. There was no evidence of the cameras or the locking system, all of it professionally removed. To the outside world, Eleanor's story sounded wild, the product of an overactive imagination in an isolated house. But Eleanor knew the truth. She received her payment. A week after her escape, a large sum of money was wired into her bank account. There was no note, but the message was clear. It wasn't salary. It was a payment for a good show. She could never look at a sculpture the same way again. Sometimes, at night, when she was alone in her small apartment, she still felt it, the sensation, the feeling of being watched. She knew that somewhere, Mr. Sterling was probably watching a recording of her terror, admiring it like a prized work of art. The game was over, but she would forever be a part of his collection.